Okay, this is session 2 of our water cycle lessons. Today we're going to be talking about precipitation. The last lesson we talked about the first 2 steps in the water cycle, which was evaporation and condensation. And today with precipitation, we have to think back to what we learned in condensation. And that in condensation, we had water vapor, which is a gas, turning back into a liquid. Now, whenever it turned into a liquid, it was up in the atmosphere, it had cooled down and condensed back to a liquid droplet. And when those liquid droplets would combine with dust, it would eventually form clouds. So we then need to talk about precipitation because the more water vapor that condenses causes the water droplets in the cloud to grow bigger. And the water drops eventually fall to Earth as a form of precipitation. And there are many types of precipitation that have different states of matter. So, for example, we might have rain, which is a liquid. We might have snow, which is a solid. And that was one that a lot of people missed on the pre-assessment, was that snow is actually solid. So we're going to watch a video that shows how snowflakes are formed and how that should help you understand more about how snow is actually falling as a solid. We have hail, which is a solid, and also sleet, which is a mixture of a liquid and a solid. Okay, so we're going to probably watch 2 videos. One's going to be on the snowflake. The snowflake's going to show you how its snowflake is formed and how the snow is actually falling as a solid. And the hail and sleet. What's the difference between hail and sleet? And I think there's even freezing rain included in that video as well. So that way you can understand the different forms of precipitation. Now, precipitation, when it falls, can either fall back into oceans or lakes. And it may run off the land and back into the river or ocean. It may also soak into the soil to become groundwater. Okay, so precipitation can do all of these things. And as it falls, it accumulates in these different places. And this is actually your 4th step of the water cycle, and which is your new step that you are just learning about in 7th grade. And that's called accumulation. Okay, so accumulation. Now we need to learn the precipitation cheer, so that way you know how to spell precipitation correctly. A lot of times I've seen on your papers and as you're working through your biome project that precipitation was spelled precipitation. So let's do the precipitation cheer. So repeat after me. You have to say P-R-E-C-I-P-I-T-A-T-I-O-N. And then you would do your form of precipitation. So let's say snow, because we want to do the precipitation cheer and really hope for a snow day. So then you say S-N-O-W, snow, snow, snow. So then you'll do it a little bit faster once you know what you're doing. So you say Precipitation, S-N-O-W, snow, snow, snow. And that's the precipitation cheer. I learned it in 7th grade, so I'm teaching it to you in 7th grade. You'll remember precipitation and how to spell it correctly forever. So let's work on labeling the parts of the water cycle, because you do have a diagram in your notes, and we've talked about all of the 4 steps in the water cycle, so you should be able to fill in this diagram. So if we take a look at the trees, we know trees and plants are able to add water vapor into the atmosphere through a process called transpiration. So write down transpiration. And as that water vapor rises and cools, then it's able to condense back to a liquid, which mixes with dust to form clouds through a process called condensation. If you look over here, you have like an ocean, and whatever it accumulates and has a surface, then you can have evaporation. So here's evaporation, and that water vapor is rising up because it's going from a liquid to a gas. And as the water vapor continues to rise higher in the atmosphere, it cools down and condenses back to a liquid. And the liquid droplets once again mix with dust to form clouds. You see with the arrows, if you follow them over, that this cloud seems to be darker. That means it's heavier. There's lots of big water droplets in there, and the heavier it is, the darker the cloud will be, and eventually gravity will take over and the drops will fall out of the cloud, which is called precipitation. You see the precipitation going down that mountain. It's running off the surface and into the ocean. So that's an example of runoff. And it's into the ocean and it's being stored there. So that is an example of accumulation. And then we have this arrow. It's pointing into uh, the ground here, and it's infiltrating the ground, and that's a process called groundwater. So you should have your chart filled in on your notes. It looks just like this one. So that's the conclusion of part 2, which talks about precipitation. If you need to review any of this material, feel free to rewind. Thank you for listening.